Yes, aliens are real. I mean, nowadays, most people already know that. Something you don't know, though, they're assholes. All of them. That doesn't make me racist. It actually doesn't make me anything. We haven't invented a word for discrimination against extraterrestrials yet. So, nice try. I guess I can go ahead and invent the word for us. Or maybe I'll just reuse one. Sane. Bad manners, bad habits, and bad breath. Yes, very bad breath. If you know or meet anyone with chronic bad breath, it could be a Glomleon on vacation. Now, you may be asking, aliens? International Space Station? A committee was formed roughly a decade ago when ET encounters began spiking upward at a rapid rate. Countries at the frontier of space exploration met and decided the best choice was, of course, to keep it all under tight wraps, while, as expected of humans, trying to turn a profit at the same time. But I'm no Edward Snowden. That's not why I'm writing this. Yesterday, an unmanned vessel docked at the station. I'll briefly explain the process if anyone is unfamiliar with spaceport security. 1. The arriving vessel radios in and alerts the station before docking at one of the entry ports. 2. The captain of the vessel will transmit the required information of all visiting crew members to our systems to be processed. Space passports. 3. The visiting crew will exit the ship into our security processing facility. 4. Both the visiting crew baggage and interior of the vessel will be inspected by STSA agents. No bottled liquids. 5. If the vessel and visiting crew are deemed fit to travel, a limited permit will be issued, and a tracker secured to the vessel. 6. All other pertinent information is recorded, and the vessel is allowed to proceed into the atmosphere. 7. Cleanup. A lot of them leave a trail. One agent works the monitor while a few are on security. It was a slow day. I was on the monitor, and the other men were napping. There's not a lot of employees available, so we grab all the sleep we can get. The vessel that arrived was standard. I'd seen a few of them before, though I can't remember which star system it derived from. There was no radio call-in, so I only noticed it when I briefly looked up from Instagram to gaze at the infinite cosmos. It drifted towards the station, far slower than one usually would. Maybe it was a rookie pilot being extra cautious, I thought. After a painful amount of time, the ship docked at the furthest port. Dock 5. Assholes. I would have gone to wake security up, but they still hadn't transmitted the crew information yet. Usually, the pilot is able to do this long before their vessel docks. I waited a couple of minutes before opening the port doors. If their communications were down, they would have to provide hard copies of the crew's information. I watched the loading bay's video feed from my monitor. Another few minutes go by. No information, and their vessel door remained shut. Annoyed, I left my post and started to head down the long, winding hallway. Every 100 feet or so, there is a bay door leading into the docking bay, where a crew would exit from before heading to SPF. Security. Inside is a space about 100 by 100 feet, separating the bay doors and the port doors where vessels docked. We only have 5 so far, but they are in the process of constructing 2 more. Once I arrived at the end of the hallway where Dock 5 was, I could see the vessel door was now open. The interior was dark. There was no sign of movement. Working the job for 18 months now, I could feel this wasn't the usual space shenanigans we were used to. The situation was all wrong. I radioed security to wake their ass up, that we had a problem. 30 seconds later, I heard their boots smacking the floor of the hallway. "What? What is it?" Ryan asked. His bedhead was apparent, and he was huffing air. "Look, it docked about 10 minutes ago. And look." I gestured. "It's empty. No comms. Nothing. It just drifted in." Ryan peeked through the window into the bay. "How the hell did they dock?" he asked. That was a good question. "Stay here for now." He handed me a pistol. Lead, as it turned out, does not discriminate against aliens. Ryan nodded towards his men. "Gentlemen, weapons live." I flicked the safety off and watched as the men in security uniforms filed into the bay. Ryan edged towards the open maw of the ship, shining his flashlight inside. I held my breath as they entered. Dock 5 is our largest docking bay, with roughly 150 feet between the bay door and where the vessels docked. I could only hear muffled talking from inside the ship and brief glimpses of the men's flashlights. A faint noise from down the hall broke my attention. It was a mechanical beeping, the noise the monitor made when an incoming radio communication was received. I looked back towards the end of the bay. If something was there, Ryan and them would have found it by now. I hustled back towards my post in time before the communication expired. The source was from outside our solar system. I activated the translator. It was in the middle of a broadcast. "Make contact. Repeat. Do not make contact." My muscles tightened. Ryan's body camera was on and transmitting feed to my monitor. I could see him and the 4 other men searching what looked to be a completely empty ship. I radioed him to make sure. "See anything?" Ryan's voice came through all grainy.
"Well, there's something. Where are you?"
The monitor. "We got an emergency broadcast. You guys need to clear out now."
"Give us a second."
He was hovering over the master controls of the vessel, inspecting a strange substance covering its panel. I opened the broadcast again, sent a signal indicating we had received the message. They answered immediately. "Do not make contact with specimen." My radio roared with the sound of gunfire. I only had time to watch from the monitor as Ryan's body camera exploded with light from the muzzle flash of automatic weapons. Ryan?
Detach the ship. Don't let it on.
Ryan's video feed turned towards the door of the vessel, making a break for the docking bay.
Now!
I slammed the button that would force eject Dock 5. The function overrides the docking vessel's doors, forcing them shut, and ejecting the vessel from the station with considerable force. It was designed to counteract a vessel with explosives rigged to it, though it had never been used before. The entire ISS lit up, and a blaring siren drowned out the screams from Ryan's video feed. From Dock 5's camera feed, I could see the ship's door closing, much slower than ideal. Just when the doors were about to clamp shut, someone in a security uniform flung themselves through the crack, into the docking bay. The port doors shut as well, and the vessel was flung off into the deep, dark void of nothingness, with a burst of propulsion gas. Ryan's body camera showed the interior of Dock 5. He was the only one to make it. He lay there taking deep breaths. Ryan, don't move. I'm coming. Ryan's voice was faint and quivered as he spoke.
I'm sorry. We couldn't stop it.
That doesn't matter, I said, stepping out of the monitor room into the long hallway. You made it. We're okay.
No. I'm still on the ship.
I paused. At the distant end of the hallway, a figure clad in security clothes shuffled closer. Its helmet lolled, left to right to left.
It's smart. It has my body camera.
I crashed back into the monitor room and locked the door behind me. Ryan? I breathed into the radio.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There was only supposed to be 4 of us. There was an extra that left us in pieces.
24 hours later, and here I am. Still, the alarms on the station have been blaring for a while now. Heard an announcement on the intercoms, but couldn't make out what they were saying. Seems like I'm quarantined with this thing. It knocks every minute or so. Never banging, always knocking. Ryan's body cam is still transmitting its feed, right outside my door. It hasn't moved yet. And Ryan? Last coherent thing I heard from him was a jumbled soup of words about trying to find another tourniquet. Not sure how long ago that was. What I am sure of is, as soon as I get out of here, I'm done with space for good. That, or my pay gets bumped to 6 figures plus benefits. Either is fine. The year was 2002. I was a young man who had become detached from a tour group in the midst of the Australian outback. After a few hours, I started to succumb to dehydration. I was envisioning a plodding, labored death in the heart of nowhere. But that didn't happen. It seemed like a mirage, but the moon spoke to me. Looking upon me with far-flung craters, which felt like remote eyes, the talking rock said it could save me. I followed a misty, moonlit trail across the arid landscape, and I eventually stumbled onto the town I'd been trying to find. Later that night, in my hotel bed, the moon called to me. It offered 3 wishes. I rushed to the window, confused as to how my replenished body, now fed and watered, could still be hallucinating. And yet, I somehow knew that it was real. I knew the moon had saved me from the desert. What do I have to lose by making some wishes to find out? So, I wished for 3 things. 1. Money. 2. Safety. 3. Health. The creature had many conditions, but I heeded the warnings from every story I'd ever been told about both genial and ghoulish genies. The moon made the parameters of its wish-granting quite clear. No wishing for more wishes. No wishing for more wish-granters. No wishing for things to give to other people. No wishing for anything that would contradict the laws of your natural realm. The ideal wishes seemed obvious. Money. More money than anyone could ever need. Obviously, I couldn't shower loved ones with wealth. I kept my job to support my family, but I used the riches to support my own needs. There's always a catch with wishing. Becoming the wealthiest man on Earth will make me a target. When I realized that, I had the idea for my second wish. Safety. I was not asking for security beyond the laws of nature. I simply wanted assurance that my financial safety net, if it were ever discovered, would be protected. But what about security against the passage of time? I can't wish for immortality, but I can employ the world's greatest doctors, of course, but that's not enough. Health. I specified to the moon that I was simply talking about safeguards which would abide by the laws of nature. For example, if I had a genetic proclivity towards developing certain diseases, either physical or mental, perhaps the moon could simply conjure a cure for every ailment that could ever face a human being. The rock conceded that even if there were no current cure for certain illnesses, it could provide a solution for every health problem that might befall a human being. The moon couldn't make me live forever, but it could ensure that I live for an absurdly long time. I thought I'd covered all of the bases. I truly believed I'd outsmarted some sort of deity. I was a fool. I never should have made any wishes. But I certainly shouldn't have made the third wish. 20 years after my Australian encounter, my wealthy and healthy life took a sour turn. The moon ensured that there would always be a cure in place for any ailment I would face. It had abolished my mental illness thanks to a wondrous pill that I wasn't permitted to share with others. So, this November, I wasn't fazed when my doctor gave me a harrowing diagnosis. Congestive heart failure. The woman tentatively said. Not to worry, I thought. The wish granter will fix it. It gave me a pill for my mental well-being, and I'm sure it will give me a new heart, too. Perhaps it'll simply grow one for me. I waited. Like a werewolf in a kennel, I howled at the unresponsive moon for attention. Nothing. After weeks without solution, I started to feel consumed by dread. Has it forgotten about me? The wishes were supposed to apply for the rest of my life. Then, one night, the moon arrived. It didn't speak from the sky this time. It spoke from the darkness of my house. A floorboard groaned in the far corner of my living room, heart thumping rhythmically against my ribcage. I found myself staring into the depths of my lounge's darkened corner. Something was watching me. The direful creature I hadn't seen for 20 years. It had no eyes or discernible shape, but it had awful white lips, which glowed like a deformed moon in the night sky. Fear gripped me. "It's you," I croaked.
I am sorry.
The creature wheezed.
You do not have much time.
There's a waiting list for heart transplants, but I thought you'd have some sort of means of speeding things up. I replied, trembling at the hidden thing in the corner of my room.
Yes, I must grant your desire. It is my only purpose.
The moon mouth maliciously whispered.
A wish is a contract. I will find a heart for you.
Before the creature evaporated, its white, lifeless lips curled upwards into a malevolent grin. The almost human expression filled me with a feeling of terror which cannot sufficiently translate to words. Suddenly, I realized the dread in my heart was more than dread. Oh, fuck, I thought, as I clutched my chest. It's happening. An invisible blade twisted into my heart, and I felt my body seize. Blackness swallowed my surroundings. My vision faded. Just one more time. I remember thinking, let me see Wendy and Maisie one more time. When I woke, I was in a hospital room. My chest felt light. It was the healthiest I'd felt in weeks. Wendy was sitting at my bedside, tears flooding her vacant eyes, and a smile was forcefully painted on her pale face. You're awake, my wife whispered. I smiled. Hello, sweetheart. I must have given you a scare. I feel much better now, though. She sobbed and squeezed my hand with tremendous strength. There was love in that squeeze, but there was also rage inconsolable rage. They did it, honey. They gave you... She moaned like a wounded animal. You have a new heart. That explained the lightness in my chest, but it didn't explain the fear on my wife's face. Her agonized expression haunted me. Why is she so distraught? I wondered, shuddering. Wendy? I whispered. What's... Maisie. My wife interrupted, now bawling. This evening, she was in an accident. She didn't... Wendy didn't need to finish any of her sentences. I knew what had happened to our daughter. I knew whose heart was in my chest. I knew what the moon had done to grant my wish. I saw my first vamp when I was 14 years old. It's not something that leaves your mind, even when you try to fill it up with good things instead. It happened at an arcade. Dad had brought me to show some retro game he used to play with his cousins. I was winning, about to set a high score, when I heard the screams. They were blood-curdling. I looked at my dad. My heart had dropped somewhere into my stomach. He was pale. He was as scared as I was. We knew what those screams could mean. We saw every morning on the news a new face, someone who had turned and killed, or someone who had been killed by a vamp. Dad didn't wait to see who it was. He grabbed my shoulders and guided me straight to the exit. I shouldn't have looked back. When I did, I saw a picture that branded itself into my brain forever. The kid was cute, blonde with big blue eyes, little overalls. He was clamping his teeth into his young mother's breast, sucking furiously as she shrieked in pain. The nursing cloth that used to provide privacy was now splattered with blood and lay idle on the floor. It's something I noticed as Dad rushed me out. I don't know what happened to the mother. All I knew was that she would never see her baby again. Not after the cops showed up and took it to rehab. Everybody knows once you try human blood, you can't ever stop. It's why mothers are warned to stop nursing as soon as the babies develop teeth. Dad said it was rare for this to happen, that it was likely she already had a scab or a small cut, and the baby had bitten after the initial taste. He gave a small seminar about her stupidity, not paying attention like that. I thought that it was pointless to criticize her. Her baby was gone. She had learned her lesson, and so had I. I would never breastfeed in my life. I was paranoid for a long time. I refused to floss, despite knowing it was impossible to turn with my own blood. I wouldn't share chapsticks or kitchen utensils. I lived in constant anxiety and fear. Then, one night, my worst nightmare came to reality. I was walking home, when I saw a man rapidly approaching from across the street. His mouth and chin were covered in dark blood. Fresh. I froze in fear. I couldn't move a muscle. Something clicked when I saw he was wielding a small knife, tipped with blood. I can't die. Not like this. I ran, with energy and speed I hadn't thought possible. While running, I tried to think of what to do, how to protect myself. I scanned the area in front of me and located a trash can on the corner of the street. Litter surrounded the bottom. I saw a glass bottle peeking out of the top. I ran as fast as I could toward the trash. When I arrived at the bin, I speedily grabbed the bottle, scanning it for traces of blood due to years of paranoid habit. I closed my eyes when I crashed the bottle down on the curb, creating a makeshift knife. I did all this in the 10 seconds it took for him to reach me. I didn't let him make the first move. I was aware it was my life or his. I aimed for his throat, my heart pounding in my ears. I screamed when I stabbed him. I was still screaming as blood gushed out of his neck. He tried to stop it with his hands, clutching at the hole in his neck. In doing so, he dropped his knife, which clattered onto the road. He faltered, gasping for air. After I stabbed him, I wanted to run. I mentally commanded my body to move as he bled out. But I was frozen. He looked at me with desperation and despair in his eyes. Even in my intense fear, for a moment, I felt pity for him. Then, with the speed of a striking snake, his hand left his bleeding wound and grabbed my hair. He pulled so hard I yelled in pain. When I did, he stuck his fingers in my mouth. I couldn't process what had just happened before I felt it. The most amazing feeling. It was like every worry was melted away. I was calm, floating up and up and up, till I went from happy to ecstatic, to a place where I felt like I was dreaming. This happened in 20 seconds, but it felt like time had frozen. When I came to, the man was lying on the street. Blood was still oozing out, but the animation had left his eyes. He was smiling. I knew why. He had chosen to do a noble thing in death. He had opened my eyes. Something I had been running from my whole life was something I should have been chasing. I now couldn't imagine life without another taste, as many as I could get. I knew I needed to run before anyone saw me and the cops came to take me away. But I had to take some with me. I took off my jacket and saturated a sleeve in the blood coming from his neck. As I did, I made sure that the sleeve didn't touch the road. I was gonna drink every drop, and who knows what germs could be on the street. I wrapped the sleeve with the rest of the jacket and ran in the direction of my home, holding tightly to my newfound treasure. As I ran, I wanted so badly to try another drop, but I knew I would black out and didn't know for how long. As I gasped deep breaths of the chilly autumn air, it registered. I killed someone. I shook the thought out of my head. It was self-defense, and I had a whole new life now. When I got home, I squeezed all I could from the sleeve and stored it the best I could manage. Life has been somewhat surreal since then. Every day is stretched out endlessly now. I'm timeless. The blood is going bad. Soon, I'll run out. It doesn't matter. I'm free. I'll live eons in days. I'm timeless. I don't know how much time I have left. My phone's battery is almost dead, and I'm using it for light while I type. If you're hearing this, I either made it out, or someone else found my phone. I'm trapped in a meat locker. This isn't just me freaking out or being dramatic, though something is seriously wrong. It started as an ordinary maintenance job. I handle repairs for a bunch of old buildings around town. Yesterday, I got a call about a butcher shop that's been closed for years. It's an old relic with worn bricks and peeling paint, like a ghost from another era. A group of investors want to turn it into something new. Keep the old world charm, but make it useful again. My job was to give it a once-over, make sure everything was up to code. My first stop was the meat locker, lurking at the back of the shop. The steel door looked ancient, practically rusted shut. I figured it would be routine. Just check for structural integrity, see if the freezer was still sealed. Things like that. I should have taken it as a sign when the temperature gauge on the outside of the locker was busted. The damn thing was supposed to be sealed off. No power running to it. But when I walked in, I could feel that bitter cold slap me right in the face. A chill that felt almost alive. It shouldn't have been on. As I stepped inside, the size of the room struck me. It was vast, and surprisingly, some of the old carcasses were still hanging there. Old, half-rotted slabs of meat, swinging gently in the shadows, like ghosts of the shop's past. It was eerie. The butcher shop had shut down so long ago, it was a wonder anything was still intact. But there they were. Massive, frozen, half-decayed hunks of meat, swaying in the air. That's when the door slammed shut behind me. I ran back, slamming my fists against the door, but it was as if something had locked it from the outside. There wasn't supposed to be a lock on the damn thing. The cold hit me hard. Panic clawed at my chest as the cold seeped deeper into my bones. My breath hung in clouds, mingling with something else. The carcasses moving. At first, I thought it was just a draft. Old places like this are bound to have air currents, right? considering they're built to contain them and all. But the chunks of meat were moving, not just gently shifting, but really swinging, as if someone had given them a good shove. I told myself it was my imagination. I was cold, freaked out by the door locking, and in a place no one had been for years. My mind was playing tricks. But as I stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The carcasses weren't swaying at random. They were moving towards me. Slowly, rhythmically, like something was taunting me. I took a step back, and one of the slabs of meat suddenly jerked violently, crashing into another, sending a hollow echo throughout the freezer. I don't know how to describe what happened next. The meat, God, the meat started twitching, not like muscle spasms or random jerks. It was deliberate, controlled. Limbs, heads, muscles were shifting inside the meat. It was as if something inside those carcasses was trying to break free. I felt like I was going to be sick. I backed away until I smacked into the far wall. There was nowhere to go. Nothing to do but watch as those hunks of meat began to twist and writhe on their hooks. One of them jerked so hard it broke free and fell to the floor with a sickening thud. I wished that was the worst part. I wish it had just stayed still after that. But it didn't. The slab of meat started crawling, the flesh spasming as though some unseen force was animating it, pulling it towards me. More slabs dropped from their hooks, thudding heavily on the floor, and each one started moving, crawling towards me with those horrible, jerking motions. I fumbled for my phone. Its light casting long, jagged shadows over the crawling mass. And then I saw them. The creatures. They were small, insect-like things, like some kind of hellish fusion of beetles and centipedes, burrowed deep within the rotting meat, wriggling and squirming inside like parasites. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of them, each adorned with long, spindly legs that pierced the flesh, stabbing and tearing, controlling it like a grotesque marionette, their bodies twisted and contorted in a sickening dance, all packed tightly under the skin, their carapaces glistening with viscous fluids that oozed from the decaying flesh. These things weren't just living inside the carcasses. They had become one with the meat, animating it as if it had always been their host. And now, they were coming for me. I backed up, breath quickening, and spotted a narrow compartment behind a row of dusty shelves. This was it, my only chance. With my heart racing, I hurriedly squeezed into the confined space. Just as I settled in, a searing pain lanced through my arm. I gasped, pressing my back against the wall as an unsettling chill began to radiate from the spot where something had just made contact with my arm. No, not just contact. Bitten. My vision blurred, and when I blinked, I received an overwhelming sense of vertigo. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the compartment anymore. I was standing right back in the center of the meat locker, facing the steel doors. Somehow, I had looped back to where I started. My pulse thundered in my ears as I turned and saw the carcasses advancing on me again. I ran, frantically darting back to the compartment. I tried again, pushing into the compartment, only to find myself looping right back. That strange cold, throbbing where the fresh mark was, only increasing in intensity after each pass-through. Each time, the chill grew sharper, pressing deeper into my skin, filling my lungs with a strange, bitter numbness. The hooks creaked above me, more carcasses dropping with heart-wrenching sounds, scraping across the frozen floor, crawling closer. I don't know how long I can keep going. The hooks swing ominously, and I can hear more carcasses dropping each loop, their heavy thuds echoing through the meat locker, followed by the sickening sound of more of those things crawling across the ground. If anyone finds this, if anyone knows what's happening, please send help. The cold spreading through my veins. It isn't just from the air anymore. I feel it surging from the wound on my arm, crawling under my skin. It pulses, as if something is moving inside me, inching through my veins, keeping rhythm with the slow drag of meat along the floor. For context, I'm a middle-aged man who lives on the outskirts of Parbold, a small English village. My house is the only one on a long, winding country road, but it does have a bus stop. From my bedroom window, I can see it on the other side of the road. It's quite handy, really. I never miss the morning bus to work, and I know the schedule off by heart. That's why I was bewildered when I first noticed the 3:17 a.m. bus on Saturday, October 14th. It woke me up, actually. I'm a light sleeper. I sat upright in my bed, twisted my body around, propped myself up on my knees, and gingerly inched the curtains open. The old lamppost on my road illuminated an ominous, fully gray, non-branded, single-decker bus. There was no interior lighting. I couldn't see a driver or any passengers. Now, this was obviously bizarre. Buses don't show up at that time in the morning. Not in this country. Not in any town or city I know, anyway. Still, I assumed, as any person would, that times were changing. It seemed like a good idea. A bus for those who've missed the last train home after a night out, perhaps. That still didn't entirely make sense. Because very few people use my bus stop. It's a 10-minute walk from here to anywhere. I checked the schedule. Nothing. There was a bus at 11:07 p.m. on Friday evening. And there shouldn't have been another one until 6:05 a.m. on Saturday morning. I watched the vehicle pull away and considered, perhaps, that it wasn't a public bus. Maybe it was a hired coach. That seemed like a reasonable explanation. I put it out of my mind and went back to sleep. However, it returned the next morning, and it continued to do so for weeks. Again, I checked the schedule. Still no mention of a 3:17 a.m. bus. I called the council, and they assured me that it wasn't a public bus. They said that I could contact the local authorities to report any suspicious activity. So, I rang the police. They didn't care. They passed me over to some civil department with a forgettable name. And that department passed me over to another department. Nobody was concerned. It became clear that each person I contacted just wanted me to tire of the whole thing and stop bothering them. I gave up on seeking help, but I didn't give up on my quest for an answer. I started making notes. The bus always arrived at exactly 3:17 a.m. It would linger for approximately 30 seconds. Nobody ever boarded or departed the vehicle. I took a picture of it and posted it on various forums. Nobody could identify the origin of the faceless gray bus. But one comment did stand out. I remember a user telling me that I should sell my house and move. They said that the bus was there for me. Most importantly, they said that I shouldn't, under any circumstances, board it. That seemed like a rather obvious piece of advice. I wasn't planning on boarding a sketchy, unlisted bus in the pitch-black hours of the morning. But everything changed on November 20th. The bus arrived on time, 3:17 a.m. I knelt on my bed and peeked at it through the curtain as it rounded the corner. Something was different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Once the vehicle had rolled to a complete stop, I heard it. Somebody on the bus was screaming. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Silence followed, but I knew I hadn't imagined it. I knew I'd heard that scream. I watched the bus and waited. 30 seconds passed. A lot of time passed. When I finally peeled my eyes from the road to check my phone, it was 3:29 a.m. The bus hadn't moved. The world outside was still eerily quiet. I reattached myself to reality and started dialing 999. The call kept failing, and then I saw that I had no signal. None. I usually had a signal at the house. I was freaking out, so I got up to turn on my bedroom light. Nothing. I flicked the switch back and forth. No power. The story was the same throughout the house. I was about to head to the fuse box, but I looked out my living room window to see a blackened world. The lamppost was dead. It had to be a power cut. That was when I finally understood, for the first time in my 10 years of solitary living, that I was truly isolated. I had no neighbors, no friends, no family. I was all alone. The gravity of the situation dawned on me. I would have to leave the house. My self-preservation instinct was to stay indoors, but I couldn't ignore the disembodied scream that had echoed through the night. I knew it had come from the bus. I knew I couldn't live with myself if I were to dismiss it. Armed with a winter coat and a wind-up flashlight, I bravely ventured into the night, locking my door behind me. I tentatively strolled down my front path, stopping at the gate to cast light onto the other side of the road. It revealed the gray, stationary, seemingly abandoned bus. There were no signs of life. Everything was so quiet. I swore to myself that I could hear my heartbeat in my eardrums. I swung the creaky gate open and began to cross the road, futilely attempting to steady my quaky knees. My flashlight wobbled in my shaky left hand, so I clasped my wrist with my right hand. I shone the light into the windows of the parked vehicle. There was definitely no driver, but it was an elevated coach, so I couldn't see whether there were any passengers. I walked around to the front of the vehicle, summoning the courage to enter it. When I reached the other side of the bus, I stood still. I tried to control my breathing. I eyed the doors for what seemed like an eternity, and then I felt my entire body clench. The doors opened. My light still wasn't revealing a driver. I couldn't see or hear anyone. I thought, for a brief moment, of that internet stranger who told me not to board the bus, but I couldn't get the scream out of my head. My gut told me that somebody was in danger. I stepped onto the bus and started to climb the stairs. The doors closed. I held the light before me, as if it were a weapon, and I gradually climbed the next set of stairs to the elevated passenger platform. I spent several seconds on each step, savoring what I felt could be my final moments on Earth. Then, I illuminated the passenger area before me. I half expected to see nothing. No. There was somebody on the bus. A young girl was sitting on the middle seat of the back row. Her head was in her palms. She was crying. I couldn't see her face. "Are you okay?" I asked, timidly. No answer. So, I started to walk forwards. I didn't know whether there was anyone else on board, but I couldn't leave her. Once I was standing only a few yards in front of her, I knelt down in the aisle. "Are you okay?" I asked a second time. The girl's crying abruptly ceased, but she didn't lift her head from her hands. "You shouldn't have boarded the bus," she replied. My light died. I furiously wound the lever at its side, but it didn't spring back to life. The girl and I had been plunged into darkness. Then, I heard the bus doors open. I slowly turned my head to face the front of the bus. I could hear the sound of low, guttural breathing. It was followed by clunking footsteps. Dim moonlight shone through the front window, but it was sufficient to display a hulking figure at the other end of the aisle. A black specter with gangly limbs was moving towards us. He hunched forwards, and his elongated arms dragged along the top of the seats. He was too tall and too wide to fit in the aisle. I turned to face the girl. She had lifted her head from her hands. I could barely hear her. "This is the last stop," she whispered. "I was really hoping you wouldn't board. I wanted more time." Before I could even comprehend what was happening, I felt an icy limb coil itself around my ankle. It yanked, and I fell. My nose connected with the floor of the aisle, and I heard something crack. I thought that was it. I thought that was the end. But I looked up to see the demonic creature coil its other limb around the girl's neck. It hoisted her from her seat. She screamed as she was lifted towards the indistinguishable figure in the aisle. I couldn't really see what happened in the darkness, but I'll never forget the sound her body made when it was consumed by the black entity. It sounded like leaves crunching beneath walking boots. I had almost lost my sense of reality at this point, but some vestige of survival instinct persisted in my fractured mind. I twisted onto my back and looked down at my ankle. I couldn't really see what I was doing in the dark. I just knew I had to act. So, with my free foot, I stamped as hard as humanly possible. The demon, which had been devouring the poor girl, unleashed an inhuman wail. It pierced my eardrums and shattered every window on the bus. The limb retracted from my ankle and returned to the shadowy being. I seized my opportunity, catapulting to my feet. I spun around and lunged for the now glassless back window of the bus. Clinging to the frame of the window for dear life, I took one last look at the dark entity that was hurtling towards me. Then, I dropped to my feet on the ground. I sprinted away from the bus. Adrenaline fueled me onwards. I didn't look back. I just kept running. At the speed I traveled, I think it only took me a few minutes to reach the warm and welcoming lights of civilization. I looked at my phone and cried when I saw that I had service. I booked a taxi. I wanted the farthest possible destination. I chose Manchester. Then I took the first train to London. For the past couple of weeks, I've been living in a hotel. I know I was a little late, but I finally took the advice of that online stranger. I moved away. I moved far away. I don't go outside at night, and I definitely Don't look out of the window. After 3 a.m. I have been living in rural Ohio for about the last year. Since moving in with my husband, I've become what some would call the crazy cat lady of our neighborhood. It's not that I have a lot of cats. It's that I feed and befriend every stray I come across. Living in the country means you are surrounded by wildlife. Deer, mice, skunks, rats, bats, raccoons, possums, and, you guessed it, cats. Humans are terrible creatures sometimes. They have a habit of taking in animals they can't handle, then quickly changing their minds when things get too hard. When that happens in the city, most people drop their new pets off at a local shelter. Here in the country, they just throw them outside. If those unloved furballs aren't fixed, they team up and make more of themselves. If I had to guess, our small town alone has about 50 strays. I would guess I've made friends with around 15 of them in the past year. I leave food on my front and back porch for them every night. I brush the more friendly ones. And I've even kidnapped a few for a day to take them in for vaccines. I can't adopt them all, but I want to try and make life a little less hard for all these guys. Lately, something strange has been happening though. I have a tendency to stay up late. My husband started working the night shift about a year ago, and it's hard to get used to sleeping in an empty bed. Since we moved for his job, I have developed a case of separation insomnia. I only really sleep well on his days off. I work the average 7 to 3 shift. When I get home, I try to clean the house, tend to our pets, indoor and outdoor, and make dinner/breakfast for him to eat before work. During this time, my husband, Jake, is fast asleep. He sleeps just fine without me. Lucky bastard. Sometimes, I nap with him after I make dinner, and he wakes up around 9 p.m. to get ready for work. Once he's gone, I tend to just turn on the TV and game to pass the time until I have to get myself ready for work. Jake and I pass like ships in the night. It's hard to manage sometimes. But we're working towards buying the house we're currently renting. After this past week, though, I hope he can be convinced to relocate. About 6 days ago, I was in the living room watching a show about hoarding when I heard something big dragging across our porch. It was around 11 p.m., and Jake had literally only been at work for an hour at this point. Sounds on our porch weren't unusual. There was a cat buffet out there. But whatever had made this sounded bigger than a cat. Its weight was closer to that of a dog, or even a person. I paused the television and waited in silence for it to happen again. My dog, Bella, asleep soundly at my feet. Nothing happened. Our front door leads straight into our living room. There are 2 huge windows that never seem to be completely covered by the curtains, and our couch sits right below those windows. I tried to arrange the curtains so the part of the window that isn't covered is farthest away from my face. If I'm laying on the couch, it's nearest to my feet. I peeked out one of the windows onto the porch and saw absolutely nothing there. So I simply pressed play and kept watching my shows. When the sun came up, nothing was unusual, except the cat food was completely untouched. The bowl on the back porch wasn't empty like I expected. Nothing happened for a few days. Honestly, I had kind of forgotten about the sounds until 2 nights ago. This time, the dragging happened around 2 a.m. I was actually upstairs in our bedroom when I heard it this time. Our bedroom window is right above the porch, and I was shocked to realize I could hear this sound from all the way upstairs. It was far too heavy to be a cat. I muted the TV and listened, slightly nervous. My dog was in the bed next to me listening as well. The dragging continued. It was like someone was dragging their shoes across the wooden porch. Bella started to growl. It was a low, throaty sound I had never heard her make before. The fact that my dog was upset by this made me nervous. I couldn't call Jake until he went on break at 3 a.m. Not knowing what else to really do, I got up from the bed and walked quietly to the window. I opened it about a finger's width and listened for the dragging. The sound of a cat almost had me laughing with relief. Of course it wasn't a person. Bella had never once growled at a cat on our porch before, but maybe it was because we were all the way upstairs. I wondered if the sound was Toby. He was an orange tabby that was heavier than all the rest of the strays. He had a few other houses on the street feeding him. The dragging continued. Even Toby didn't seem to be that heavy. For almost 15 minutes, something dragged across my porch from one end to the other, repetitively. Then, it stopped completely. Bella stopped growling and went back to sleep, and I waited nervously to call Jake. He thought it was Toby.
You're tired.
He told me.
You're up at night watching TV by yourself. Your imagination is running away from you.
That didn't explain why Bella was upset. But maybe he was right. For all I knew, there was a stray cat I didn't know yet, putzing around on our porch. The next morning, the cat food bowl was toppled over. None of the food inside was eaten. This all leads me to what happened last night, just a few hours ago. Jake was off work Monday. We spent the night enjoying each other's company and watching movies on the couch. Neither of us heard anything strange. I went to work Tuesday morning on basically no sleep at all. I came home to do my usual routine and threw Jake's work uniform into the laundry. While I waited for it to dry, I made the mistake of falling asleep on the couch. I woke around 2 a.m. to the sound of a cat meowing. Moonlight was streaming through the crack where the curtains didn't fully cover the window by my feet. The television had turned itself off because it was on a set timer. Jake must have gotten ready and left for work without waking me up. Bella lay on the floor beside the couch, and again, she was growling. Bella growled louder at the sound of it. Her hackles were raised, and I could tell she was working her way up to a bark. Dragging again. The thing lumbered across the porch and over to the window. I could see the shape of it blocking out the light where the curtain didn't cover. In that moment, I was sure of two things. The first was that there was not a cat on my porch at all. The second was that whatever was out there was looking into my living room. This was a damn near perfect cat impression. If I couldn't see the huge, horrifying, human-shaped shadow at my window, I might have even believed it. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I couldn't move. Bella jumped to her feet, ran to the side of the window where the shadow loomed, and let out one good, ferocious bark. Then, she seemed to really see whoever was at the window. She began to tremble and whimper. The shadow said to her. I was too frightened to move. My dog was whining at my feet, and I couldn't tell if this weirdo on my porch was able to see me laying there or not. After a few moments of silence, a bark resounded through the room. At first, I thought Bella had found her voice again, but she was still shaking at my feet. No sound had come from her mouth. The shadow at the window was mimicking her. I could feel tears start to stream down my face. All I could think about was a question. Had Jake locked the door before he left for work? I don't know how long I laid there, crying in silence and fear, listening to this shadowy person meow and bark. When the sun came up around 5 a.m., the shadow shifted. It seemed to slowly drag itself away from the window and off my porch. It's now 6 a.m. as I write this. Bella and I are still shaking. Jake should be getting off work soon. When he gets here, I'm telling him, I want to fucking move. When Jake came home yesterday morning, he asked me why the porch was covered in cat food. I had no idea what he meant, so I nervously opened the front door and looked. The entire bowl was flipped over, and bits of crushed cat food were spread across the entirety of our porch. It looked like someone had dumped the bowl out and proceeded to stomp all the food into dusty bits. The cat food on the back porch was completely untouched. I tried to explain everything that had happened while Jake was gone. I guess the idea of a meowing monster tormenting his wife sat very strangely with him. So he pulled up our Ring camera and tried to review the footage taken at around 2 a.m. I was honestly too afraid to watch it. I just waited in silence for him to finish. He definitely looked disturbed by what he saw, but he was clearly not convinced it was a monster. Some teenager must be pulling a screwed up prank on us. You should move both cat food bowls to the back porch from now on. I argued the idea. What would moving the food do about this dude sitting at our window, meowing like a crazy person? I told him I wanted to leave the house altogether. Jake sighed. You know we can't move right now. All our money is tied up in this place, and the lease we signed isn't up for another 6 months. Screw the lease, I said indignantly. I want to feel safe in my living room without someone or something looking into it. We argued for a bit longer than I want to admit, before I had to give up. In the end, he was right. We have nowhere else to go so soon. The nearest hotel is a good hour-and-a-half drive from Jake's machinist job. If I wanted to move that badly, he agreed we would look into places and move once our lease was up. In the meantime, we decided to get new living room curtains and upgrade us to a Ring doorbell instead of the one we have just sitting inside of our living room. The rest of the day was pretty uneventful. I went to work and came home with new curtains. I picked a dark brown shade that let in basically no light. It's a terrible choice for a living room, but it would block out any chance of seeing a shadow at night. I got home to find Bella had not touched her food all day. She was curled up in a pile of clothes in our laundry room sleeping. I tried to let her outside to go potty, and she refused to go out until I went out there with her. While we were out, Toby the orange tabby stopped by for a bite and rubbed on Bella's leg. She seemed to enjoy his affection, until he meowed up at her. Then, Bella growled at him. That shocked me and Toby both. Bella never growled at Toby before. She has never growled at any cat. Bella loves cats. I took her inside, and she went back to sleep in the laundry room again. I also decided to stop sitting in the living room at night. Before Jake left for work, I gathered everything I would need for food and entertainment, before basically locking myself in our room until Jake got home. Bella came with me, of course. I turned the TV up as loud as I could reasonably put it, hoping I would drown out any noise if my night visitor decided to come back. It was once again around 2 a.m. when I heard a faint dragging sound coming from below. Like I said before, my bedroom is right above the porch. Bella woke up from her comfortable sleep at my side and started shaking. I turned up the TV and hoped I could just wait it out. I could not. After a few minutes, there was a loud... Bella whimpered. I reminded myself of what Jake said. It was just some kid playing a prank. I wasn't sure I believed his idea, though. The noises grew louder. It sounded almost like someone was smacking their hands on the side of my house in frustration. Like the stranger could hear my TV drowning out their intrusion. And that made them angry. I turned the volume louder. The sound slapped at the old paneling of my house. only getting louder with the TV volume. The force of the hits were shaking my walls. I started to fear this person would try to break into my house if I didn't respond to them. I reluctantly muted my television and crept toward the window. Once again, I only opened it about a finger's width. Go away! I tried to sound braver than I felt. My dog shook behind me so hard, it reminded me of how she acted on the 4th of July when fireworks went off. There was an eerie silence that followed my demand. I wondered if I had surprised the person by actually speaking to them. All I did was make things worse.
Go away.
The voice that repeated me from outside almost made me piss my pants. It sounded garbled and wet, like someone was talking with a mouthful of water.
Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away.
Each time it repeated my words, it sounded more like my voice, like it was practicing talking like me. The banging started up again. Go away. It mocked. Go away. A dragging sound. More dragging. The sound dragged its way along the outside of my house, back and forth, until it stopped directly below my window. I wanted to crawl back to the bed and hide myself under the covers like a child. Isn't that always the best way to hide from monsters? The sound was rapidly climbing its way up the side of my house, getting louder as it approached. I managed to let go of the window and shove the curtain back into place just before I heard something slap onto the glass. I fell back on my ass and stared at the curtain in shock and horror. From the other side of the window, I heard its voice. I scrambled up from the floor and ran, booking it down the hallway and into the bathroom. Bella ran almost ahead of me as I went. I slammed that door behind us and locked it. I didn't care that I had left my phone on the bed. All I cared about was that bathroom had a lock and no goddamn windows. Bella and I stayed in that bathroom with the lights on all night long until Jake got home. He wanted to know why I didn't answer when he called me around 3 a.m. on his break. Jake doesn't seem to really believe what I told him. He's treating me like I had some kind of nightmare while he was gone at work. But I know what happened. Something crawled up the side of my house last night and tried to look in at me. Something that slapped at my windows and spoke in my voice. I wasn't asleep, and it wasn't a dream. I know this for a fact, because in the light of day, I went back into that horrible bedroom and looked at that window. I saw the greasy proof that coated the outside of the glass. There's a handprint on it.